Okay, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we will continue in this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we have a more excellent way. He's been talking about spiritual gifts that have been given to members of the church as the Holy Spirit wills. Of course, it was through the laying on of the apostles' hands. We know that from Acts chapter 8. But in Corinth, they did have spiritual gifts. And in chapter 12, it not only is it a discussion of these spiritual gifts, these are miraculous things that they could do, one of which was speaking in tongues, but that's not the only one. They had that of gifts of healing. There were numerous things of that of prophecy, of the word of knowledge, and that of the word of wisdom. But we have these things, these miracles that they could perform are not going to be continued indefinitely in the church. The church is going to be forever. But those miracles are not going to last. And he tells them of a more excellent way. And there's a certain type of individual who loves the thought of miracles. They want the fantastic. But when Paul speaks to us of a more excellent way, he's not talking about greater miracles. He's talking about love. That love is something that will never come to an end. Those miracles would. They would be no more. And he speaks of it in this chapter. That miracles would have their day in confirming the Word. They would have their day. Once the Word is confirmed, it doesn't have to be reconfirmed every single time, every single generation. It doesn't. It's been confirmed. It's been accepted. It's been accepted by the righteous. In this case, it's been accepted by the church. Prior to this, you have such as the writings of Moses accepted by Israel. But here we have him speaking of something that is far greater than the miracles. Even with the miracles that they were able to perform, there was still envy, strife, and division. The miracles couldn't solve those things. It's incapable of solving it. While they confirm the Word, the miracles themselves, while offering benefits in numerous ways, there are things that it cannot offer. But love can and does. These miracles only get you so far. And what is their... Miracles are nothing more than a sign. A sign just points to something. Miracles are a sign, and they confirm the Word. Love is showing the words of God living in you, and does resolve problems of envy, strife, and division, and everything else. Now, they had serious divisions going on here, and he describes the church as a body. He makes a comparison that just as the body has many members in it, that your eye is not your foot, and your foot is not your ear, and your ear is not your hand, and your hand is not your heart, and your heart is not your lung, so too each member supplies something in the church. That each member has a purpose there. And its purpose is important. Everybody's purpose is important. And just because, and he goes into this in chapter 12, just because the foot says, I'm not a hand, is it not of the body? Yeah, it is of the body, and it's important. It may not get a foot may not get the glory that a hand gets. Foot is stuck in a shoe or a boot, and has to bear the weight all day long. Hands don't have to do that. But yet the foot is absolutely necessary. It's part of the body. Now, we go to chapter 13, and he now begins with this: though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Notice what he just said. He said, if I had this extraordinary gift and don't have love, it's meaningless. Now it goes right back to what we were just saying a minute ago, that the thing of miracles only supplies a certain need, only supplies some things, but love gives something far greater. Though I were able to do these things, and I made mention of last week, I want to make mention again. I'm going to show you something as well. Though I speak with the tongue of men and of angels, does not mean that Paul could speak the language of angels. The language of men, yes, we know that he could do that. The language of angels, no, that's not what he's saying, that he could do that. As an angel comes down, and they could either speak in Hebrew or Greek or any other language of men, or they could just choose a language of the angels. That's not what he's saying. He's showing this extraordinary thing. If he had that ability and he didn't have love, it's all meaningless. It's meaningless because love is greater than these things. That love has to be there. Just because someone is able to do something extraordinary doesn't mean they're doing it with the right motive, and doesn't mean that they actually have love behind it. Now, I want to show you this, that in speaking with though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. Now, we just go to verse 3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love. Okay, so if he could speak the language of angels, one could, because of the language that's there, because of the sentence that's there, that would also mean that he offered his body to be burned. Well, he didn't. Okay, he's just showing this extraordinary language. Though he were to do these extreme things that would show a power of miracles and a power of goodness, if there was no love in it, a power of sacrifices, if there's no love in it, it's meaningless. So that someone going around performing miracles but has no love behind it, all it is to them is just performance and wanting the glory, or just doing it for the sake of doing it, that if there is no love there, it's a meaningless act. There's nothing to it. And if he were to speak, we come back to verse 1, chapter 13. If he were to give some kind of great oration, if he would give some sort of fantastic sermon, and yet there's no love there, all he really is just that of clanging cymbal and sounding brass. That's it. We might say an empty suit. That there's really nothing there. There's no love. You're just would seem to be a performer, and that's it. It was a great performance, and there's nothing else that can be said about it. Just a great performance. Now we go to verse 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. Now, did he ever move literal mountains? Not that we're aware of. There's nothing in the text that ever says he did. This is just, if this were the case, that I had faith to remove mountains. And if it were the case that he had all knowledge and that he understood all mysteries, and I will tell you, I don't think he had all knowledge, and I don't think he had understanding of all mysteries. I don't think he did. That there are, I can think of one right now, that is, when is the day of final judgment? Paul could not answer that. There's no way that he could. He wasn't given that information. When Christ was here on the earth, Christ wasn't given that information. So Paul most certainly could not know. But he's saying, if I am able to do all these things, prophecy, understand all mysteries, all knowledge, all faith, but I don't have love, I am nothing. That's harsh. That's harsh. Is it possible for someone to be able to speak in languages miraculously and also have prophecy and have understanding of mysteries and knowledge, have that understanding and still not have love? And the answer to that is yes, it is possible. It is possible because they're showing it in fact. They're showing, I'm talking about the Christians at Corinth, that they are able to do these things, not to this extreme, but they can speak in tongues and they can heal and they do have knowledge, all right? But they still are taking each other to court. They shouldn't be doing that. They're still, even though they have those that have knowledge and those that have wisdom given to them, they're still abusing and complete reinterpretation of the Lord's Supper. And to where there's nothing good about it anymore. You have those that are defending a man in the congregation who is in sin. Everybody knows it. And yet, there are miracles they can perform. So they're proving that you can have these abilities and not have love. You can be doing this and not have love. And of course, we could look at Judas. Judas was performing miracles. He's one of the 12. The 12 are sent out, and they're told that they're going to be healing the sick, raising the dead. They're going to be doing all these things. It doesn't say except Judas, who's not going to be able to do any of those things. He's one of the 12. Exactly at what point did Judas decide he's going to betray the Christ? I don't know. But he is able to do these things too. Now we come to verse 3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. So here is this extraordinary benevolence, this extraordinary sacrifice that is going on, but if there's no love behind it, it profits him nothing. It's meaningless. And that's what it all comes down to. From verses 1, 2, and 3, all these things that are extraordinary things, but if there's no love behind it, it's meaningless. There's nothing in it at all. Nothing whatsoever. So these things of miracles, but also that of sacrifices, all these things, extraordinary things, if there's no love to it, it's nothing. It's nothing. There's nothing in it. So love is far greater than any of these things. Now, we have a description of love. Verse 4, we have a description, and it is powerful. And I just want to take a second to say something. That the Bible wasn't written by one person on this earth. It's written by God, assembled through time, through various prophets, as that prophet is inspired by the Holy Spirit through time. And it's around 1,400 years in the making. All right, think about that. 1,400 years. 1,400 years ago. How long ago was that? For us, how long ago was that? That's a long time. Okay, if we were to just look at a timeline and go back 1,400 years, where would it be? Well, the 500s? Okay, that's a long time ago. That is just after the fall of the Roman Empire. That's what is typically referred to as, well, maybe not the absolute beginnings of the the Dark Ages, but getting kind of close in there. 1,400 years in the making. We have some 40 authors for the Bible, for the biblical text, starting with Moses, going to John, Moses writes Genesis, John writes Revelation. These two are some 1,400 years apart in time. We have the authors, those that, various prophets, whether it's Moses. Moses was raised as a prince in Egypt and then leaves all that. And his background is completely different to that of David. David, who grew up as a shepherd and becomes king, who's different than someone like his own son, Solomon. Solomon wasn't raised on the farm. Solomon was raised as a prince and a prince of Israel, and he would become king. We have others such as Daniel and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah and Amos and Jonah and so many others, Elijah and Elisha, with so many others that they have all different backgrounds. And then we get into the New Testament, and we're going not only into a different time, but a different language entirely. Old Testament Hebrew and a smattering of Aramaic. New Testament, Koine Greek. And someone like Peter, a fisherman. Someone like Paul, or Saul of Tarsus, what is he? Now he has a trade that he can do, which is a tent maker, but he was one of the Pharisees. And he worked for them. He worked for the Sanhedrin court. That's what he did. You have all of these authors that are coming from all these different backgrounds, cultures, languages, time, and they all agree. They all are in harmony with each other completely and are able to discuss topics that are extremely complicated. And one of those topics is love. And it's the highest form of love. And here we have love defined for us of what it does not do. And, well, let's look. Love, and also what it does and what it does not do. Love suffers long and is kind. Now, this is agape. This is the highest form of love. This is a love for, yes, friends, yeah, but also a love for enemies and a love for others you know nothing about, but would help them, want the best for them. This is a love for God and for mankind. This is the highest form of love. It suffers long and is kind. Suffers long, well, that means you can expect that in dealing with folks, some folks, and maybe all folks, are going to bring about the need for patience. And maybe some that are just trying to be around, and some trying to be around every now and then. And it's hard to be around them. But here is, it suffers long and is kind. Continuing on. Love does not envy. What have they been doing? Yeah, there's envy. They've been raising that to a different level of where they're envying each other, not just in material things, but also in that of the spiritual gifts that each other possesses. All right, it does not envy. Love does not parade itself. So that's the other side of it. Love isn't one that wants to be envied either. Love isn't something that is just goes around announcing itself of, look at how great I am. Love is very, very quiet and very humble and allows others to make mistakes and help them through it. Allows others to be inconvenient and allows others to do things the way that may be less than likable, but love suffers long nonetheless. Love does not parade itself, meaning that I have put up with all of these things. Let me tell you about the love I possess. All right? Is not puffed up. It's not arrogant. Verse 5. Does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own. Now, here are some things that we go back to chapter 10, verse 24. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. That's going to take love. That takes love for this. This isn't selfish ambitions. Love is not part of that at all. Love is not a thing of selfishness. Love wants to benefit everyone. And it does not seek his own. Is not provoked. There is, the definition of meekness is power under control or power under restraint. Meekness is of not going back to not parading itself. Meekness does not do that. Meekness also is not arrogant. But it's not provoked. That is, of withstanding the stresses, withstanding outside forces. Love continues to remain strong. And that can be hard to do. Hard to maintain that kind of love. But this is what love gives. Thinks no evil. Doesn't wish evil on others. What does Christ say concerning those who are jeering at him? Himself he can save. Others he can save. Let him save himself now. Others he can save. Let's see what he can do now. Which, that's, if they'd only put that into perspective as to what they just said. But what does Jesus say? Forgive them, they know not what they do. Stephen says, do not lay this charge on them. They're stoning Stephen to death, and this is what he says. This truly is wanting the best out of others. Thinks no evil. Does not want this. And also keeps, another way of looking at this is, does not keep books, does not keep records on evil things either. I was amused by my aunt years ago. I spent a couple of summers at their house, and every now and then she and my uncle, they would have at it. There's something happened. I don't know. I never pretended to know everything, but my aunt was really good at remembering things that she didn't like. And this is keeping a record. And she would begin to say things that, okay, I don't need to know this. And obviously I'm in earshot. And these are things, how many years ago was this? I wouldn't know. I have no idea how long ago it was. But did she remember them vividly? Well, love does not do that. Love doesn't keep that kind of record. There's a thing known as forgiveness. There is forgiveness. And it's not holding you to something that you should have forgiven them of that a long time ago. That should have been done. Verse 6, does not rejoice in iniquity. Now, that's another facet of love in this. That love is, let's just face it, love is a significant part of righteousness. For those that say they don't like righteousness, For those that just hate that word, all right, there's some things about righteousness that you like. I'm going to tell you, you like. You're going to refuse someone's love to you? And I don't mean someone who necessarily wants to marry you or anything like that. I'm talking about someone who has mercy on you, compassion on you, can sympathize or empathize with you. That's a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. That's part of righteousness. Welcome to righteousness, because this is what it brings. This is what it brings. It does not rejoice in iniquity, which means those who do rejoice in iniquity do not have love. They can pretend it, but they don't. They don't rejoice in iniquity. They don't want someone acting wickedly because it has offended us. They don't want someone acting wickedly because that person should not be doing it, and they will be harmed by it, or someone will be harmed by it, and they will lose their soul because of it. There is a love there, wanting the best out of that person, wanting the best out of it. It's not a thing of self-righteousness that I don't like seeing a drunkard drunk. It is a matter of love for the individual. That person is drinking themselves to death. That person is drinking themselves into hell. Have no concern there. This is what righteousness is. This is what love is. And, you know, in our day and age, and this is nothing new, all right? Don't think these things are suddenly being discovered as new truths out there, because there's nothing new about it. That this does not rejoice in iniquity in our current climate. Not only are we supposed to rejoice in iniquity, we're supposed to be joining in with the iniquity. We're supposed to support it and join in. And if that isn't satanic, it is. All right. That's extremely satanic. Well, love doesn't rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Now, we could go and look Romans chapter 1, because already there's some things that we've been reading in here that go very well with Romans chapter 1 and what was happening there in Romans 1. And there's, in Romans chapter 1, it's a history of the Gentile world, and there was a suppression of the truth, not a love for it. We could also go to certain books in the Old Testament. There was a suppression of the truth. We could look at the book of Jeremiah, where the unfinished book is being read before the king. It's a scroll being read before the king. It hasn't even been finished yet. And what does the king do? He takes a knife, shreds it up, and then throws it into his fire. Okay? Rejoices in the truth? No, an enemy of it. Did that king have any love? No. Someone who rejoices in iniquity doesn't have love. Someone who despises the truth doesn't have love either. Doesn't have love. Now, verse 7, love bears all things, so it's suffering long. It also acts, it is kind. It is not provoked, so it bears a lot. It bears all things, believes all things, that is, all things that are true, hopes all things, endures all things. That's powerful. Speaking in tongues, can it be said that it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things? No. Healing? No. Raising the dead? No. No. That is not the sign of righteous behavior. It's not. Because the Christians at Corinth could do these things, but they weren't righteous. They weren't behaving righteously. They had left the truth, and they were dividing themselves up, become fracturing. They are nothing like what is being described here. Now, some of them probably were, some of them. But for the majority of them, there were serious problems that were going on in this. All right, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Verse 8, notice this, love never fails. And there are numerous ways in which we can look at this. But the way we need to look at this is that of the eternal nature of love. Because that's really is what is discussed. Now, love never fails, meaning love, when it is applied, never fails. And that is true. Love, when it is applied, never fails. But love never comes to an end. Love doesn't stop. There will always, and it's not dependent on us. It's not dependent on us to keep it going, because love continues on regardless of our behavior. But love never fails. That it is something that goes all the way into eternity. Now, notice this. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. What does that mean? All right, we got to look at it in the biblical context. We got to look at it in the way, is it possible that there were any prophecies from God that didn't come to pass? That they failed in that sense? No, none. Would there be a time when someone making a prophecy from God and the prophecy just doesn't happen? No. That's not the meaning of the word fail here. The meaning of the word fail here is that whether there are prophecies, they will fail. They'll come to an end. They'll come to an end of where there are no more prophecies given. There's no need to. All the information we need to know has been supplied, and supplied universally, meaning what you can know is the same thing I can know, is the same thing that 500 years ago people could know, and if the earth continues 500 years from now, people can know. Everybody can know it. Everybody can know it. So there's no need for anything new. It will all be completed. It will all come to an end. There will be no more prophecies. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. And of course, this means the miraculous gift of tongues, gift of speaking languages you have never studied at all. They will cease. So this tells us the meaning of the word fail, that these things are going to end. They're going to come to an end. They will be no more. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Not the knowledge of the Bible. Knowledge of the Bible will continue on. But the ability to be inspired, or God inspiring another prophet to write more, that came to an end. And he says it's going to vanish away. So the words fail, cease, and vanish away mean the same thing. That they have an end point, and there will be no more. There will be no need for any more. So that people who say they speak in tongues today, what of it? They're not speaking in tongues. They're speaking Babel. Anybody can do it. I've heard plenty of infants speak Babel. Okay, I've heard all kinds of nonsensical things that there was nothing there inside it. And what is spoken of in the New Testament, those tongues were for a very practical purpose of being able to teach people in many languages, having never studied those languages, but can go right into a Bible study with them immediately, fluently, knowing all the nuances, knowing all the dialects, knowing everything, all the sayings, and any way it's necessary to express something to them, being able to do that as though you were not born with it, but as though you were raised in that language and well educated in that language. That's what speaking in tongues did. Today, no, it doesn't, as we said last week. Even those who think they can speak in tongues have to go to language schools to go preach in some other country that doesn't speak their language. Don't speak Swahili. There are no gifts of tongues for you to be able to just speak it miraculously. You got to either go where it's spoken or you're going to have to go to a school. One way or another, you've got to get it just like everybody else, because these things came to an end. Now, same thing concerning prophecies. What about those who say God speaks to them today? Well, if they don't mean, and often they don't, if they don't mean the Bible, and the Bible does speak to us today, but the Bible wasn't printed just for me. It's printed for you and everybody else. But someone who says, God spoke to me, if they think that God spoke to them in any kind of miraculous way, that God revealed something that it's not revealed here in the Bible, that somehow He spoke to them at home or spoke to them in their garage or wherever it was, they're lying. It is a lie. God does not speak to us like that anymore. Once again, the Bible is universal. It's for everybody. Why would He tell all of you one thing through the Bible and suddenly He tells me something different? Why would He do that? Sounds to me that more resembles a serpent in Eden than it does God in the 21st century, or God ever. God doesn't tell one people one thing and then tell another people a contradiction of that one thing. He doesn't do that. He is consistent because the truth is what God speaks. And he's consistent in everything that He does. Is no shadow of turning with Him. Now, verse 9, for we know in part and we prophesy in part. What's the meaning of that? That means Paul writes what he's been given. There are certain prophecies, Agabus being one, Agabus telling Paul certain things that are going to happen in Paul's future, and that's how Paul is getting that information. And, as a matter of fact, for that of salvation, Paul doesn't receive the information he needs for salvation except through Ananias in Damascus, who tells him what he needs to do. Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins. Acts 22:16. Okay. He tells him what he needs to do. There are certain things that Paul knows, and there are certain things that Peter knew. There are certain things that Moses knew. And we can look at all of them. There are certain things that Isaiah knew. Isaiah, it never received the inspiration to write the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis was already done when Isaiah got around. So there's no need for that. There's no need to rewrite it. There's no need to give the revelation again, the revealed knowledge concerning all of Genesis again. That's been given. It's in words. All right. So we know in part and we prophesy in part. When Paul is saying this, the New Testament had not been completed, obviously, because the book of 1 Corinthians isn't done yet, not to mention the book of 2 Corinthians, which would come later, not to mention all the other books that would, and I don't know what books may have been written by the time he's writing 1 Corinthians. I don't know. But I do know that the book of Revelation hasn't been written yet. I do know that. Not in the time that he's writing this. And I do know that as he's writing this, there are still things in his future that he's going to write later. He's going to write 1st, 2nd Timothy later. That's going to be later in his life. Titus, later in his life. And he's saying we know in part and we prophesy in part. Not every book in the Bible has everything you need to know. Not every book. Genesis has a value to it, but it doesn't tell you everything you need to know. And we can just look at the book of Psalm has extraordinary value to it. Not greater than Genesis, but it's not lesser either. It has a value to it, but it doesn't tell us everything we need to know. That we need the Bible in its entirety. We know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. That we won't know in part anymore. We will know everything we need to know when that which is perfect has come, or when that which is complete has come, because that Greek word can also be rendered complete in the English. All right, and also in the Greek, in the wording, in the grammar that is there of the Greek, that which is perfect cannot refer to a person. It must refer to a thing. Whatever is perfect or whatever is complete is not a person. It's a thing. What is it? It is the biblical text. When the biblical text is completed, then all that which was given in part will be done away, because all the parts are supplied. There doesn't need to be any more parts. There is a point at which in a factory manufacturing cars that it is said of a car, it has all the parts for the car. It has everything that it's supposed to have. And then it's driven off to wherever it's going to be sold. All right, it's ready. It's complete in its total design. It is complete and ready to put on the streets. All right? With the biblical text, when he's writing this, it's not complete yet. All the parts are not there yet. But they will be in time. In time. And it's all going to occur in the 1st century. They will be in time. And then when it's complete, that prophesying in part will be done away. Because he just said we prophesy in part and we know in part. That miraculous knowledge, that prophecy, those things all will end. That which is in part will be done away. Verse 10. We'll read verse 11 and then we'll need to close it down for this morning. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. He's talking about putting away something childish, putting away something. Why is he suddenly talking about his childhood? It goes right with what he's been saying. With what he's been saying, that there are matters of the infant church, characteristics of the infant church, things occurring in the church in the 1st century that once it has everything it needs, and it's the Bible, there are certain things it doesn't need anymore. And that would be the miracles. It doesn't need to confirm the Word because the Word has been confirmed. The Word is completed and there will be no more. And there's nothing else we can expect from God. Nothing else. There's no missing books. There's no plates to be uncovered in New York State. There is nothing like that. It's all been revealed. All been revealed. And with this child of a church, this juvenile church, it understands as a juvenile church. It speaks like a juvenile church. But when it becomes full grown, there are certain things it doesn't need anymore. Doesn't need the miracles anymore. And let's face it, with the miracles, what did it give Corinth? It didn't bring them out of carnality. It didn't give them salvation. It didn't make them into better people. It is confirming the Word, but he just tells them love is what they're missing. Love is far greater than these things. Love, love doesn't make a big splash. Love is not fantastic. Love is not something that is mystical and unknowable and incredible. It is considered as extraordinarily mundane, but it is far more powerful than in the things that matter than these spiritual gifts. All right, we're going to need to close it down. And thank you, everybody, and we will continue next week.